Thanks for tuning in to If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo podcast on the Overreaction Sports Network powered by Believe. And now your hosts, former Director of Football Administration for the Buffalo Bills, Don Purdy, and former coaching assistant for the Buffalo Bills, Josh Cormier.
Welcome to If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo. Don, how you doing?
Hanging in there. The title of our show is Overreaction. Josh, in 20 seconds, tell me how it is that you're sitting in that chair after what happened in the last 2 hours, and I'll show you.
Well, I learned to jump my truck from a Halo battery, which is one of God's great inventions. Everything's good here. Everything's good at Dave and Adam's Card World. The Chase podcast, the Chase show that I'm on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. All's good in my world. How about you?
Well done. Yeah, no, I left my laptop at my daughter's house. So just before we were going to jump on here, you were the one having issues logistically, which you handled very well. I was the one that had to go back and get my laptop, and that my 1-year-old grandson, yes, he found a way to make it a challenge for me to remember where it was.
Well, we hit it on you. Nice.
But we did not overreact, either of us.
Good. Well, speaking of overreaction, Don, we haven't been on in a couple of weeks now, and we had a lot of good feedback, and it got a lot of good reactions to our interview with Derek Burrows. Hope everybody enjoyed that. I know I certainly did, and I know we have more interviews coming up in the near future. Kind of what we wanted to touch on today. The Bills seem the last few years to have had these 2-game mini swoons, and then it's followed up by, kind of like long winning streaks. And, when you reached out to me yesterday, I think about a topic, midseason acquisitions, came to mind. And I know that you have a list of notable ones. And I think maybe before we get into your list, something that I, always like to talk to you about and jog your memory, and things that maybe our listeners would want to hear from you, is maybe just the logistics of what it looks like in season. I know you talked before about pro personnel. Do you think that Brandon Beane, the pro personnel guys, do you think that they had Amari Cooper on their radar since the offseason, since the beginning of the season? Like, what do you think it looked like to have a trade come together so quickly on a Tuesday morning after a Monday night game? That just didn't happen overnight, right?
No, yeah, you're right. He was on their radar. It's funny though, because from April or March when they come back from the workouts, they're doing the off-season workout program, OTAs, minicamp, mandatory minicamp, the whole time. You're being told that this is your team. This is the 90 that we're going to take down to 53. There's a process, and everyone here that goes through training camp, we've talked to so many players that made it through training camp, Josh, and they studied the roster, and they tried to figure out where they fit. So the most intriguing part of a move like this is all of a sudden someone is taking up a locker, and it as someone that just was never part of any of that. But
there's the whole talk of like, we're a family, we're a team, this is your home, blah 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 blah, until the Browns are 1-5 and their best receivers on the market.
Yep, moving miracle.
Right.
There, right.
Yep.
Right.
No, that's a really good call. So take me upstairs, take me into the GM room. Like with the GMs that you worked with, how, like, Brandon Beane. I know you didn't work with him directly, but all the other GMs, etc. Do they have, like, who calls a GM? The secretary, the GM? Like, is it GM to GM? Is it pro personnel to pro personnel? Like, how does it become known that a player like Amari Cooper is available, and like the basic price tag?
Yeah, it's the directors of pro personnel that have every team. We talked to John Guy at length, and that was his life. Like when he was here professionally, looking at every team and what their contract was, and looking at teams they were playing for, and what the possibility is that they could be available either to be a salary cap casualty or available for a trade. And as things progress during a season, the GM will always tell you that they're trying to improve the team. They don't want to admit that there might be a weakness in their, a specific position, whether it's DBs or wide receivers, but they know that if they're producing less than they should be, that they could be a player there that they could bring in. And so Amari Cooper is a perfect example of that. And especially in terms of what it would cost the team, not just for the current season, but for future seasons. In terms of a trade, you take on their contract. And that would have been a deterrent for Adams, but not as much for Cooper. And they, certainly looked at both guys as having been first-round picks. And
Yep. All right. Who contacts who?
It goes both ways, but yeah, a team that the GMs like to kind of pride themselves as sort of a brethren, where they'll be honest with each other, even though they're naturally competing against each other. But they'll tell each other at league meetings and everything over drinks, look, if we see ourselves going south and we have a player, we will tell you that he's available, but don't fool yourself. We will accept bids for that player, but only with, commodities coming back in terms of draft picks. And so that, that could have been initiated by either team. I really think that this one would have been initiated by the Bills.
Okay. So like Brandon Beane or the pro personnel guy will literally pick up the phone and call, the matching person in Cleveland and say, hey, is player X, is Amari Cooper available? Is it that cut and dry?
Yeah, just like that. And they'll say either no chance or yes for a price, of course, for a price. Let's talk about the price.
Is that, do those conversations go on like literally every day if you're a GM of an NFL team? With every other GM in the NFL? I mean, is it like a giant circle of communication between the guys you trust, the guys you don't like, or is it only do you only communicate with another GM for a specific reason?
Yeah, you communicate that you like and trust, but you don't rule out talking with a GM that you don't like or don't trust, because if they have and help you, even if it means kind of eating crow or whatever to ask about it, you still do it. And I wouldn't say every day, no, but there's no surprises when someone, your administrative assistant says, hey, the Cardinals just called to inquire about somebody, and you just take the call. And if you don't, even if you laugh at it at first, you bank it and realize, okay, that guy's in the market.
Do you remember a conversation, in your 15 years as director of football administration, where somebody called and got kind of laughed off the table about the availability of a player that was on the Bills?
Sammy Watkins was an interesting player. He got a lot of when it appeared that he was great, but he was injured a lot, and the quarterbacks was a carousel of guys, throwing the ball to him. That's when I remember we were going to London in 2015, and he made a comment to me because I had to make sure he had his passport to get ready to go, even though he was injured. And I said, yeah, something about when you come back, we come back from London. And he's like, well, we'll see if I come back here. Like, oh, and I'm like, even you and your agent, like, kind of have a feeling that you're certain it's on future here. So the answer to your question was, were you because of the availability? That is not a direct answer to that, because he was saying kind of the opposite. Like, I know I am available.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that the players that know that they can, at least, if the team's going to be competitive and headed toward the postseason, even if their contract is a heavy one, they know they're here that season.
Right. It feels like to me that trades are becoming more and more prevalent, in today's NFL. It felt like back in the 90s, an in-season trade was really kind of unheard of. There's more, salary cap gymnastics. Seems like more of a willingness of teams to kind of embrace tanking in a certain way. The Browns clearly have decided that, they're not going to win, and the idea of getting a high draft pick for a quarterback seems to be more in vogue these days. Was that something? The Bills obviously went through the whole drought. Was that ever discussed internally? Like, hey, you know what? Why don't we sell so that we don't have to be stuck in purgatory and be picking eighth every year?
No, it wasn't, because I mean, the only year that really, the team was really bad, like we knew it too, was Chan Gailey's first year, and I think we went 4-12 or something, but Fitz started to look good, and that's the thing. Like, the team was always kind of in the middle. Like, there was never ever a talk about tanking, because you were always going to be kind of in the hunt, and kind of 6-6, 5-6, and have a chance to you saw like the Giants come 6th seed and sneak in and win it twice, sure. And so there was never talk about, let's just do this for the future. There were future moves, but it was never at the cost of not winning, except for that maybe first year with Chan.
Did you ever find yourself wishing that the team wasn't kind of stuck on that hamster wheel? It's like in the NBA, right? Like, if you're in the middle, if you're the Chicago Bulls, if you're the Atlanta Hawks, if you're these teams that can't get to the bottom of the lottery and get Victor Wembanyama or get one of these generational guys. Look at the Commanders and the Bears now with Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. Like, has completely turned your franchise around. These teams that are stuck in the middle, that to me is like the worst place to be in the NFL. Did you ever find yourself getting frustrated? Like, man, if we could have gotten Cam Newton, like that year that, the Bills were they picked third. Did you ever find yourself wishing, man, I just would rather punt one year to get the quarterback?
No, I honestly no, because every year you thought if you could just get in, there was never a player that would be like, that's a player it's worth tanking for. Even like Cam Newton came in and, he visited our franchise and kame in the building. Buddy Nix was there, and our strength guys were telling us that Cam Newton came in and, knew he was a big shot, knew he was a high pick, and we probably, barring a trade, didn't have a really chance for him. But so he was walking around the locker room and the training room, and just he went there, sat on the table, put his feet up on the table, and all of a sudden our strength coach was like, our GM just walked in the room and he just put his feet on the ground, like, oh, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. Like, totally changed his persona,
sure.
From what he was. And that was it. He was no to the Bills after Buddy saw that.
That's interesting. You wonder how many times that happens, right? Like that a great player is kind of disqualified for something that has nothing to do with, on the field, or whatever else. And so, so let's back to the kind of the nuts and bolts of this, which always interests me. So, Brandon Beane calls up the Cleveland GM. Is Amari Cooper available? Yeah, he is. What's the price? Like, how much give and take is there usually, on the GM level? And then do you usually have to clear the trade with the agent before, do you think they had to make sure Amari Cooper was cool coming to Buffalo before they pulled the trigger?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. But what I heard him say today, and it makes sense, was that, he knew he was coming to a winning franchise, and know that he knows he's in the twilight of his career, and that, it made sense to give it a shot. And, there was no benefit of him staying there. So I that was signed off on pretty quickly from his end, and his agent, I'm sure, too.
So then the draft pick kind of compensation, is that usually, I mean, is that like a long drawn out process, or is that more of how about a fourth, how about a third, how about we meet in the middle with a third and a fifth for a fourth and a sixth? I mean, is that something that, would go from the GM down to, the pro personnel guys, or does it go up? Like, is that usually a long drawn out process, even on draft day? Like when you're just swapping picks and not players, is it quick?
It has to be on draft day, obviously, because you're in that time slot of, 15 minutes. And so, but teams have their parameters set before that. Like, don't even entertain talk of, something less than a third or, higher. So, but in this case, especially with the trade deadline being Halloween around, as it always is, there was some time to take it back and forth. And yes, the pro personnel guys were process, but it's always up to the GM.
Sure. And then, do you feel like an how long do you think it's going to take a seasoned veteran like Amari Cooper to like fully assimilate to the city, to the region, to the facility, to the team, to the offense? Like in your perspective, whether a street free agent, whether a trade, how long mid-season do you think realistically before he can make a big impact?
It's asking a little too much to make it week one, although the playbook can be simplified for him enough. It sounds insulting to say it needs to be simplified, but it is a different language. But it could be simplified enough to say, this and this means, a post or an out, and a player that good, and that's what makes this acquisition so interesting. Thinking back to historically, players that have been acquired by the Bills during the season that fairly or unfairly to him, the expectations on Cooper are probably as high as I can remember, really, except for, maybe going back to Cornelius Bennett, and he blew those expectations out of the water. Like
we've talked about, that one before.
Yeah.
Last, when you mentioned it to me yesterday, last year, getting Rasul Douglas mid-season was a big one, and that one obviously immediately came to mind for me. It feels like, Cornelius Bennett, obviously, I remember like the first couple of weeks they had like a package of plays in for him where it was basically just go get the quarterback, right? Like he was such a freak athlete that until you learn the defense, just, go out there on third downs, Cornelius, and just go get the quarterback. Like
there's some
positions.
First game. Yeah.
Yep. I certainly remember. You're right. So it's like there are positions where, you can just kind of instinctivly play right off the bat. Receiver is not one of those. And like you said, to simplify the offense is not at all an insult. It's, an NFL offense is a very, very, very complex thing. And, there might be a cachet of plays on Sunday, to get him on the field, to get him a couple of touches, maybe just even as a decoy. But you're right. He's not going to be full speed week one.
Right. Physically, he's probably kept himself that way, but in terms of the nuances of an offense, for the level that he's played at, they'll come up with a few plays that will give him a better than 50-50 chance to, make a catch and, maybe a run after catch. But going forward, as he acclimates to the offense, he'll be expected to produce at a level. This team is obviously for the last 6-7 years has been right there in the playoffs, ready to take it to the next level. And
where do you think he's living?
Probably in a hotel. Probably, yes. The league gives 14 days. You could put a player up for 14 days. When I was there last, on day 15, you can still put them up, but that's part of the salary cap.
Okay, so he's
Yeah.
probably obviously he drove here from Cleveland. I don't know if you read that or not, but he drove
Sure.
here from Cleveland up the 90. Obviously, you're not going
Yeah.
to take a flight. But right, like you're moving with none of your stuff, and people don't usually think about the behind the scenes stuff that you might have been involved with. Would you have been
I
involved
was.
with getting the player
I was.
housing and all of that?
I would have been. Yep. And we
Did
would have been
you enjoy that?
responsible for that. For a player that we traded for, I enjoyed it because there was a nuance that was kind of it was a novelty to have a player that could be a difference maker, and we were required under the CBA to cover all of his moving costs as long as they were market. So we would, the truck and the flight and moving all their household belongings to Buffalo. And a lot of times it's funny because, like, Rugent would have called me day one and like, remember, you guys are responsible. That wasn't the case for signing a free agent player.
Okay.
It's only the case for acquiring a player, claiming them off waivers or from a trade, that we were responsible for the costs. And
That makes sense. That makes sense because
yeah,
that's like kind of an involuntary move on their part, right?
yeah, exactly. And so there were times we traded for a player, and I was waiting for like weeks or whatever, and I said, by the way, hey, you have expenses, and just send me the receipts. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, we're moving. They're like, oh, cool, but I didn't keep the keep the receipts, or they're like, we'll
Sure.
figure
Well,
it
that's
out. Let's
probably
talk
not his
about it.
number
Yeah.
one priority. That's probably
No,
not his number one priority right now, right?
no.
So okay, let's say he gets to the building today. Players day off. Well, right? No. The player probably has the day off the first day, gets his playbook, meets everybody. I mean, is he just sitting in that hotel room, you think, like looking at the playbook? You think he's over at Josh Allen's house having dinner? Like, how do the guys
That's
usually treat somebody who's just coming in, a higher profile guy, not a street free agent, not a rookie, a guy of his caliber coming to the team? Like, what do you think that looks like? They go out to dinner, they go to Josh Allen's house? Like, what do you think?
yes, and yes,
Yeah,
and the position is relevant. Like, if it's a kicker, or
sure.
maybe bad example, but if it's a linebacker or something, maybe not the quarterback's house, but a receiver, yeah, he's going over to meet with Josh Allen and talk. And hey, guy, how are we gonna make sure that we feature you? And yeah, so that definitely happens. So, but no matter what he does at night, he's required to be in the building by 7:30 the next morning, or 8 o'clock, whatever the team says, and he's getting rested up to make sure that he brings his A game. And depending on what his contract status is, he's going to want to. A competitor like that is going to want to make sure and see the opportunity. Like, holy cow, I have an opportunity to
New lease on life.
prolong my career, lease on life, and help this team reach something they never have, and extend my career financially and in every other way.
When we talked about this, you said you had a list of guys that you remember. Who else is on that list?
Well, chronologically, he's a guy that came before my career started with the Bills, but one of the guys I've heard a lot about, and you and I have talked to him, was Steve Tasker.
Sure.
And he came in Marv's first year as a guy that was with the Oilers, and they brought him on. John Kidd, the punter, was already on the team, and I'm not sure what circumstances led to the team thinking that they had a position ready for Steve Tasker, but they did it and they brought it on. And it's just funny to me to think that, like, it seemed like such a trivial move. Probably the team wasn't going anywhere that year, but they were about to bring on. There's no player in NFL history that changed the game special teams wise more than Steve Tasker. And
like, it would have been a blip. It would have been a blip in the Buffalo news.
Sure. Yep. And then, what he did for his career, all the, Bills going, never losing a game in 4 years, going to the Super Bowl, and the games that he changed field position wise, blocking punts, blocking kicks, making tackles. You're right. It wouldn't have been a blip, but, Bennett, we talked about. An interesting one for me, Kyle Orton. And he had been a very successful quarterback with the Broncos and the Bears. He was part of when McDaniels went to Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Orton was the quarterback. They went 6-0, and he was a very competent quarterback. And then he was signed here week 1 of I think it was 15 or I can't remember 14, and had a really good year. But it wasn't midseason, but at the same time, for a quarterback to be brought in of that caliber, it's disruptive. And somehow he came in and, led the team to around a 500 record. And
August 30th, 2014. He was
well done. Wow, nice. Yeah, so that must have felt to the team like it was midseason, right? I mean,
sure.
After the process and all of that. Week 1 of 2007 is famously or notoriously, unfortunately, remembered for the opener against the Broncos, where Kevin Everett suffered that injury. But what's often forgotten is there were 3 other starters that were lost for the year that same game. And there were a lot of replacements signed that next day. And one of them was Brian Scott. And he was a former Penn State linebacker / safety. And he was just an injury replacement for, I forget who. There were so many injuries that happened that day. But he ended up starting the rest of that year and 4 more years. He had a big interception against Brady and a comeback win against the Patriots. But it's funny because he was kind of like a safety with a linebacker body, where what you're seeing now in the league, the trend is linebackers with a safety body.
Right.
Bernard. And it just shows how much in 10 years the game has changed even on defense. But Brian Scott was a really, really good safety that wouldn't have come in, or he probably would have gone somewhere, but probably, not to the Bills if not for the injuries. And he was a very good player. And I think probably, Josh, for, what we're talking about with Amari Cooper, there's no better comparison than James Lofton.
Yes.
And in '89, just before you came to the team, I was just there part-time, but I was hoping to, sign on with the team, which I eventually did in 1990. But I remember, the team had gone to the AFC Championship game, 12-4 the previous year. And we signed James Lofton, partially through the year. I had nothing to do with the signing at that point, as I would have in my later years. But it was hard to frame. But for the Bills, when I was there with them as a part-time member before I became full-time, all the guys that were there, Bruce Smith, Thurman Thomas, Jim Kelly, Andre Reed, they were still relatively young in their careers, and I was sort of just getting to know them. And what happened when we signed James Lofton was like this rush of nostalgia of, holy cow, our team just signed a guy that I can identify with as having his football card. He was a guy from the late 70s. He was a superstar with the Packers and then the Raiders. And somehow the Raiders decided, for whatever reason, he wasn't part of their plans anymore. And we brought him. And I remember, holy cow, James Lofton. And I remember there was a buzz in the building about bringing him in. And there were a few people in my office that went downstairs and they saw him. And I was expecting like this was kind of a desperation move or a pity. I don't know what I thought of the move, but when I thought about him, I thought, oh, well, if he's available, he must not. There must be something wrong with him. He must be maybe kind of soft or
washed up.
Not. Yeah, just kind of. And then I saw him for the first time, like, holy cow, the guy still looked like an Olympic sprinter, just cut and everything. And then I heard in practice, like he was burning past everybody. He was like 32 years old. And I'm like, how is it that, how do we get this guy? And can he still really play? And then, of course, for the Super Bowl years, he proved to be like that same version of this younger stud superstar version of James Lofton that I remember from my football card days. And it was the first player that really sort of brought that to my living experience with the Bills. And
you were starstruck, huh?
With him, I was like, holy cow, that is James Lofton, and he was every bit as good and still getting way past people on the downfield routes, and it was cool. So those are a few.
Yeah, for sure. That's like 22-year-old me walking into the Bills locker room for the first time and seeing Thurman Thomas, Jim Kelly, Bruce Smith, and Andre Reed.
Josh, that's great. That's
very similar.
For our ages, yes, that you had that in spades. I had that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Yes,
it's exactly the same. Before we wrap it up here, I wanted to get you, and I haven't. You don't know I'm going to ask you this. I haven't gotten your reaction yet to the NFL rule change allowing like private equity, like minority stake ownership into the NFL. And the news, I don't know if you saw that Josie Altidore, like a U.S. Olympic soccer player, and Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady, of all people, are buying a small stake into the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, more famously, Tom Brady is also buying into a stake of the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yes.
What, being somebody who, knew Ralph Wilson really, really well, knew and worked for the Pagulas as well, and was in an NFL front office for 35 years with only single ownership or,
family ownership. I was 27 years, just to.
Oh, I'm sorry, 27 years. Fine.
What? Still a lot, I know. But
why? Yeah. What's your take on that? Like, what was your initial reaction to think that Vince Carter can walk into One Bills Drive and call himself owner?
Well, I mean, how do you distinguish that between what the Green Bay Packers do in terms of their stock? How much more does Vince Carter have? And I will say this. It's funny because the first taste of this I got was with the Dolphins, and it was Jennifer Lopez is one of the minority owners, and the Williams sisters, one or both.
Yeah, Venus and Serena. Yep.
Yep. And when I was there, with the team the last 14 years, and making sure everyone got in the team bus, it was funny because, there would be Jennifer Lopez and the Williams sisters going by, and kind of matter of factly, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're part owner. I had no idea what kind of say they had. It's probably
zero.
But I would tell my daughters that they would ask, they would hear or see on social media that they were part of it. Like, oh yeah, I see them every time going by, and they're like, oh my gosh, are you? No way. I'm like, well, yeah, they're part owners, but you mentioned Ralph Wilson and the Pagulas, that they are very savvy business people who understand that to whatever extent they're granting these partial ownerships, there is a ceiling there that those people will leverage that for their own gain however they can, but it will not, if it ever does result in some kind of save for them, that will be really newsworthy beyond kind of the novelty.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially Tom Brady might obviously have a little bit more of a say in the on-field things for the Raiders. Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady, world-class athletes, probably not, ready to take over decision-making for an NFL franchise.
So what do you think, Josh? Was it because they both played for the Toronto?
It's interesting that it's interesting that it's those two, right? Like I got to tell you, 10 years ago, boy, if the new stadium wasn't being built right now, alarm bells, right? Like, could you imagine the alarm bells?
Here we go. Yes, exactly.
I thought that, and I mean, very clearly, I mean, if you're the Pagulas, and if Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter, and Josie Altidore want to give you X amount of money for 5% interest of the team, why wouldn't you take it? They're going to make that 5% back, and if you could get an infusion of who knows, $5 million, $10 million in cash to give away a fairly insignificant portion of the team that you're not planning on selling and is only going up in value every year, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? And it raises the brand and the profile. And I can see it from T-Mac and Vince Carter's point of view too, where, if they've been successful at business, and there's only 32 NFL franchises, right? And to be able to walk into a room with all your, former teammates and NBA alumni and say, hey, I'm a partial owner of an NFL team. That's something money can't buy in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, it's sad.
Yeah, but I thought of you and I laughed, and I'm like, boy, if the new stadium wasn't going up, boy, there'd be some conspiracy theories about Toronto,
huh? Yeah, that would be the common common denominator that you would draw. They would tie themselves together for.
And just Toronto for the record, your 27 years there, you were not paid in any kind of equity shares, so you own 0% of the Bills, correct?
No.
Yeah. We wouldn't be doing this podcast.
No, I don't.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, I know that you are working on a couple more interviews for the next upcoming weeks.
Yeah.
Hopefully our schedules allow us to start recording again once a week. My boys' fall sports season is now mercifully over. So the opportunities open up for me as well. And I look forward to doing more of these with you soon here, buddy. More interviews, more insights. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the Bills are going to go on a little bit of a midseason run here. The schedule sets up nicely, and they might be 8-2 going into that week 11 matchup with Kansas City before the bye. I wouldn't be shocked.
That aligns nicely. Yeah, 8-2.
Yeah.
The division looks well. The Jets got Adam
wide open.
Still, it's theirs, and
it is.
But there's still so many recurring themes in terms of the way the past. Cincinnati, don't dare rule them out.
Right.
Despite their record, the Chiefs are probably not as good as their record, but you look at the teams that are likely to be in play, and man, if the Bills are 8-2, and that 49er game is big too, even though it doesn't count.
It's going to be a real fun one.
But there's lots of the season is laying out to be very exciting.
And I wanted to wish you a happy 20th anniversary, Don. 20 years ago tonight began the greatest comeback in sports history. It was Game 4 of the ALCS between the Yankees and the Red Sox in 2004. Don't let us win tonight, said Kevin Millar. Don't let us win tonight. So tonight, 20 years ago, my friend, started the greatest comeback in sports history. And I don't know if you know yet. I will make sure to share with you the link. On October 23rd, Netflix having a full 2-hour documentary on the story of the 2004 Boston Red Sox 20th anniversary edition. Maybe we'll both have to watch it and then give our reviews on the show.
Okay, I will appreciate, I'm sure, the production of the show. Okay, yeah, yep. I could absorb the 04 Red Sox into the Yankee lore, and be able to have a mature conversation about that. Good credit to them.
Happy anniversary, my friend.
Good credit to them. It was well done by them.
It is the greatest comeback. The greatest comeback in sports history. So we will we'll leave it there, and hopefully we will see. Please like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Overreaction Buffalo Network, Joe Miller, Jerry Ostrowski, John Fina. So
yeah, thanks to all. I'm encouraged by seeing a kind of a new audience we're getting here with Overreaction, and it's been fun, and we'll keep it going.
Yep. I'll see you next week, buddy.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
Take care.